So this is the latest edition of today's KhoodeelaarTV Channel, being broadcast online only, not on satellite, not on terrestrial, not on cable network. And this is a continuation of our diagnostic look at these times of London, the section that is kind of tokenistically called law. And it has got a plug for the master of the rolls, new master of the rolls, a man called Jeffrey Voss. And he's saying that, well, the Times is saying he talks tough on bullying and wants more justice online. Well, the contents of this spiel given to Jeffrey Voss are devoid of any real evidence that he even understands the concept of justice as experienced by people who seek remedies through the court system, the court bureaucracy. And this piece is completely typical of the Times coverage or cover up of the corrupt legal bureaucracy, the inadequate legal bureaucracy, and the criminally abused legal bureaucracy, criminally abused by the holders of the judicial posts and the operatives in posts of administration. So we shall be looking at this piece again, substantiating what I've just said. In this spin by Jonathan Amis, who is described as editor, Times Law, there is no mention of any racism at all. There is mention of bullying, but there is no real mention of racism. There may be a tokenistic, in passing reference to racism. And it is absolutely essential to debunk this lying plug. The master of the rolls is supposed to be the second most senior post in the court bureaucracy in this country. And it starts, the first paragraph says, bullying on the bench must be taken seriously and rooted out. And this man is saying, Jonathan Amis, that is saying, the second most senior judge in England and Wales, argues amid rising concern over recent allegations of racism. Sorry, harassment. It should be racism, but it says harassment. Sir Jeffrey Voss, who took over as Master of the Rolls and the head of civil justice at the beginning of the year, says, any case of harassment or bullying is a matter of very serious concern, particularly for the senior judiciary. We will make sure that we investigate and deal with any reports at all and treat it with seriousness that it deserves. Now, who decides the seriousness that it deserves? Who? What criteria? And that is the central defining question, because it is left to the prejudice and the ignorance and the stupidity of the members of the judiciary and the wrongdoing criminals imposed in administration of the judiciary in the courts. Most of them are wrongdoing and lying. So there is no even possibility, in theoretical possibility, that the judicial bureaucracy generally, quite apart from the specific reference to bullying, which is trendy, to say that you are concerned about bullying makes you come across as trendy and kind of on the case. And the reality is that the courts bureaucracy everywhere at every level in the country, that is England and Wales, they say, is a corrupt bureaucracy, is a racist bureaucracy, is an unanswerable, unaccountable bureaucracy. And there are many kind of loopholes, and there are scope for the corrupt judiciary to abuse the already corrupt judiciary and make life absolutely difficult for those who desperately need redress through the court system. The court system is inaccessible to most people because of the obstruction, not because of the lack of money only, but because of the obstruction and the built-in criminality and racism, the built-in racism of the court's bureaucracy. So in this piece of the 5 paragraphs, spread across 5 paragraphs, there is no reference to racism. There is no reference to abuse. There is no reference to obstruction at all. So what is this guy doing? Master of the rolls? What is he rolling out? He's saying in one part of the piece, Jonathan Amis says, Voss claims that improving the efficiency of the civil litigation is not purely of interest from an academic or legal profession perspective. Now, why on earth would he say either of those things, that academic or legal profession perspective? The fact that he mentions academic and legal profession perspective and doesn't mention the litigant, the people actually at the center of the litigation, shows that they don't care about the litigant at all. And in the so-called academic and legal profession outlets, there is no reference to the litigant, and there is no reference to the racism, the built-in corruption, the built-in obstructiveness that imperils the effort, obstructs the effort, defeats the purpose of the litigation altogether from the beginning. So, he forecasts, that is, Voss forecasts, that there will be wider benefits for society as a whole. What society does he mean? He doesn't mean the litigants at the point of contact, who are the ones that are obstructed from start to finish. One of the most important things about the vision I have for online civil justice and for family and tribunals as well, is that it will have a tremendous economic benefit for the UK. What tremendous economic benefit does it mean? He doesn't explain the day-to-day encounters, the obstructions. It's a vague, absolutely irresponsible slogan. It could be anything. There is no reference to rights. There is no reference to obligations. And there is no reference to impact on people's lives. Instead, he's talking idiotic. He says, because at the moment, when you have a dispute, comma, it's a very misleading, messed up sentence. He says, because at the moment, when you have a dispute, comma, if it takes a long time to resolve, there is an economic drag caused by the small business that cannot collect a debt, or by the psychological traumas of prolonged litigation, which stultifies people's ability to work effectively. What is he talking about? He is not talking about the stultifies, not stultifies. Providing an effective and efficient civil justice system, mainly online, will resolve cases more speedily and will have a very beneficial economic effect on the country, as people will be able to vindicate their rights and move on. How will they be able to vindicate their rights? That is the only mention of rights that I have come across in this piece, although I had said previously before reading that part that there was no mention of rights, but there is a mention of rights, but that is a tokenistic, misleading mention of rights, and I shall read the next and the last paragraph. Some lawyers will immediately envisage their roles being taken over by robots sprouting algorithms, but Bose says that the cream of the profession need not worry. Cream of the profession. Notice that. This is a very good thing. This is a very good thing for lawyers, he says, adding, they will be able to concentrate on what is difficult and what raises complex areas of law and what adds value to their clients. There is no reference to lawyers' corruption, criminality, licensed law traders, dishonesty and crime and criminality, and the absolute absence of any redress against corrupt and crooked, incompetent, lying, racist law traders. The tokenistic, completely intentionally corrupt complaint system that supposedly exists against crooked law traders and lying law traders and dishonest law traders is a thing called the legal ombudsman, which is completely stuffed with liars. There is no evidence that the legal ombudsman is supposed to adjudicate against corrupt and criminal and dishonest law traders. And the legal ombudsman is just like the so-called local ombudsman. Supposedly, in place to adjudicate against corrupt and criminally wrongdoing local councils. And there is absolutely no kind of what is called regulator. There is no regulation. Because even before the Conservatives, fronted by David the Crook Cameron, got into number 10 Downing Street in May 2010, Gordon Brown and Tony Blair were already deregulating the already fragile regulation kind of regimes. So when the Conservatives got in, they completely did away with. They scrapped everything. So whatever goes under the title of regulators in this country today is a misleading, false kind of label. There is no relief against corrupt and criminal and wrongdoing law traders. And there is no redress against the wrongdoing judges, racist members of the staff in the courts, and the lying judges and judiciary. So it's an impunity that has been given to the judicial bureaucracy and the judicial liars in judicial posts. So there is no definition of what was refers to civil justice. There is no acknowledgement of racist judiciary, and there is no evidence that the judiciary is actually up to the job. Now we go onto the Daily Mail, and they are using the term, let's find it. Yes, they're using the phrase anti-racism campaigner and broadcaster. Well, his name is Trevor Terrible Phillips, and his ex-wife Asha were both present for their daughter's last hours. Now, that is understandable that this piece by in the Daily Mail for one of the most corrupt servants of racist cause. Trevor Terrible Phillips is a stooge, has been a stooge for more than 40 years for the racists in this country, who have given him places after places after places, platforms after platforms after platforms, to undermine the idea of fighting racism, let alone actually believing in the concept of the need to fight racism. He is a mental slave of the worst kind. And he has now been joined by Tony Sewell, whose name, because of this record of mental slavery and denial of the existence of racism, we have named him Tory Siwa or Tony Siwa, just as we named Trevor Terrible Peelips, entirely based on his role over the last decades as the most persistent, pernicious servant of racists against the rights and causes of the people of African and Asian origin and other people victimized and targeted by racists in this country. Now, anti-racism campaigner is not something that actually fits the description based on the evidence of the behavior and the role of Trevor Terrible Peelips. He has never been anti-racism campaigner. He born very black. He has to intentionally demonize, undermine Polly Toynbee. Those two have promoted Trevor Terrible Peelips furiously. Want to promote a genuine black person. They wouldn't. And so Hattie Harmon, while she was part of the administration, appointed to chair the Commission for Racist Enslavement, or CRE. And the Commission for Racist Enslavement was already a Commission for Racist Enslavement, as I gave it the name. Remember, this is April. And in April 1977, this Commission for Racist Enslavement was launched formally. And it was deliberately lumbered by Callaghan administration with David Lane, a former Conservative member of Parliament. Now, my engagements against the racist David Lane were too many and too consistent, because David Lane essentially was a racist and had no interest in ending racism in this country. And he was a colonialist, he was an imperialist, and Callaghan deliberately put someone like David Lane in that post as the first chair of the Commission for Racist Enslavement. I asked leading questions, original questions, at the launch of that stupidity in April 1977. Lane couldn't answer. So Lane gave a banal kind of response which didn't constitute a rigorous, factual, honest, overdue, let alone anti-racist commitment carrying answer. And of all the other people, whoever there were present at that time, nobody else asked any question that was of any significance at all. Remember 77. So this was 4 years before Ken Lying Still Livingston became leader of the GLC by a coup that he led against the Labour group leader who had actually won the GLC election in 1981 against the Conservatives. So there was nobody present at the launch of the CRE in April 1977 that could either supplement what I had said or update on what I had said or supersede it in terms of intellectual content and quality and substance. Whatever I had said to or asked David Lane, David Lane couldn't. And it's not the only one. Whoever later became the chair of the Commission for Racial Equality equally was unable to answer my questions. And those included the racist liar and creep, Peter Newsom. The racist liar and creep, Peter Newsom, had been imposed at the Inner London Education Authority before he was appointed chair of the Commission for Racist Enslavement. And the Commission for Racist Enslavement had a particular policy to hold bogus news conferences and invite the ethnicity-linked publications in all the languages. And in the 70s, the UK had a number of ethnicity-linked titles that are published in ethnicity-linked languages. All of them, despite differences between them in terms of language, all of them were mentally servile, intellectually stupid, and ignorant about the international context, the historic context of racism. And they didn't know the law. They didn't know the law that could be applied to expose racists to their wrongs, as being engaged in doing wrongs. But the CRE, the Commission for Racist Enslavement, within quotation, religiously held these news conferences and invited these creeps. There were no questions. Think about this. There were no questions from any of them about the data about racist incident, the role of the Commission for Racist Enslavement in combating increasing racist incidents. And there was no other question either. So who was the questioner? The only questioner was me about any of that. Now, would the Commission for Racist Enslavement welcome questions that they couldn't answer because they hadn't done the job? They were not interested in doing the job. So they looked for ways to stop me asking questions. So they gave the instruction to the security at the reception to deny me access to the to the events. That is what they could do. Now, it was cowardly and it was stupid and it was racist, because all I was doing was asking the body that had been set up allegedly to end racism or to question racism, and they were stopping me. Was I right or were they wrong? I was right and I am right, because today's Guardian says that racism has been absolutely brazen all these 75 years or so, since the end of the Second European War. And the Guardian has got its record in lying for racism and racists and lying for the likes of the racist Peter Newsom, as I have said before. When I was doing the campaign in 1992, early 1992, I started to defend the governors, parent governors, at the what was then grant maintained Stratford School in the London Borough of Newham. And I did that without any previous connection with any of the governors or parents or anybody else in the school. And I had most certainly no one that I knew who was attending that school. So I didn't have a personal connection with that school. What I did have was the role as the London Collective of Black Governors, London Collective of Black Governors chair, a duty to protect black governors, black meaning African, Asian, so on. And that school had governors from mainly Asian and white backgrounds, but also had some African members of the governing body because of the composition of the school. But my decision wasn't as a result of anyone approaching me, but as a direct result of Fleet Street. That at one stage, the stage before I intervened, the evening No Standard had a piece byline to an Indian named Bhatia, whatever the first name was. And remember, it was 1992, beginning of 1992, January 1992, which is still within the period of the anti-Muslim heat created by Satan Rushdie. And Rushdie was still quite frequently in the news about the kind of fabricated scenario created by anti-Muslim controllers of Rushdie, so that they could say that he was a victim or remained under threat from attacks by so-called Muslims. So the reference to any kind of Muslim connection with Rushdie that they could construct was very explosive. So what this Bhatia, either Shekhar Bhatia or some Bhatia, did was to say that the chair of the governors, who was a Muslim from Pakistan, the chair of the governors had actually supported the attacks by Muslims on Satan Rushdie, or the attacks by Muslims against Satan Rushdie's book and his role. Now, as soon as that appeared, that chair of the governors, a Muslim Pakistani, became instantaneously identifiable as a radical threat to the British society. And yet that guy, Ghulam Rasul Shahida, had no part in the campaign against Rushdie. As most ordinary Muslims hearing the news would do, he too was an innocent trapped in a surprise question put to him by this Shekhar Bhatia or whatever Bhatia. And the question was a leading question, literally leading question, suggesting if Ghulam Rasul Shaida supported the campaign against Saitan Rushdie. And he interpreted that in his mind as being a question about whether he, Ghulam Rasul Shaida, agreed with criticism made of Saitan Rushdie for attacking the Islamic faith. There are two different things, subtle difference, but this difference could only be understood and appreciated by somebody who was deeply involved in the thinking about all of this. Ghulam Rasul Shaida was not involved in the thinking. And his answer was off the cuff, immediately, without thinking and differentiating between the two positions, and without thinking about the implications of the impact. Shaida said, yes, I am, or words to that effect. Remember, that was January 1992, and I'm not looking at the script or the contents of the paper, which is what I was reading the evening, no standard. And before I got involved in the campaign, so I contacted this person, and I also issued a statement to the media condemning the attack on the parent governors. And as soon as I did that, I became involved, because the following few months, kind of news running orders in the London region, almost every week included one or more items about this school.